The United States, we are a superpower in decline, and how we manage that decline will say a lot about what happens globally next. We as Democrats need to figure out a way to make the Trump and Republican corruption tangible for people. One of the problems with the Biden years was that the Biden team thought beating Trump once was enough. And this is why you see voters so anti-incumbent right now. They want people with new ideas.
There's a generation growing up that I don't think has had an example of what democracy is.
This is another reason elections matter. Someday they're going to come for something you care about.
Oh my God. The mic drop moment. Mic drop. Hi, I'm Jim Fielding. Welcome to Ask for an Answer. Hello, kind, curious, and talented human beings. It is time for another episode of Ask for an Answer with Jim Fielding. This one is really, really exciting because this is our last guest episode of season 2, which I just have to share some gratitude for all of you for carrying this through season 2. And I saved this guest for last on purpose. And so you're going to hear this episode, and then next week there's going to be a little recap episode of season 2. And then I'm going to go on hiatus to work on writing book number 2. And we'll be back in September after Labor Day with season number 3 of Ask for an Answer, which is kind of unbelievable. But my guest today is Marie Harf. And Marie, thank you so much for being here. I've been so excited. We have scheduled this episode for a long time. So I'm so excited you're here. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, I am thrilled to be here, and congratulations on the second book and finishing the second season. I mean, I've been so lucky to watch you grow, to become an author and to become a podcaster and to really take up space that's important. And so I'm just honored to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Oh my God, it's amazing. So Marie, I was telling you beforehand, I was not going to read your bio because first off, it's super long and impressive. But like, if I met you at a cocktail party, tell me what Marie does, because you do a lot. You're kind of like me, which is what I love. I'm hard to describe.
I know. That's right. So I spent 20 years working in Washington, D.C., in government, in foreign policy work. And during my time in Washington, I always said that my goal was to help explain what the U.S. does overseas to the American people. Right. And so I can talk about the different jobs I've had at the CIA and the State Department and doing media work. But it was really, that was sort of the goal, Jim. The American people deserve to know what their government is doing overseas on their behalf. Right. And we can talk about what's happening now. I know we'll get to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, one would think. Yes.
Since I left government, now in 2017, so almost 10 years ago. I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. I have sort of transitioned into the next phase of my career, and that has been doing two things. I work at a university. So right now I work at the University of Pennsylvania. I run as executive director our foreign policy think tank. I'm in my office in Philadelphia today with you. And so at Penn, we have something called Perry World House, which is what I run. And the goal of it is to help bridge the gap between really smart academics who know a lot about current issues and possible policy solutions and people in government actually doing policies. Right? That's not just the US government, that's the UN, that's other governments, that's NGOs, right? Journalists. And so that's what I do full time. But also for the last 10 years, we can get into this. I've been a Democratic commentator on Fox News. I joined the day Donald Trump was inaugurated for his first term. And I did that because I thought one of the lessons of 2016 was the Democrats were ignoring whole swaths of the electorate because we thought we could. And turns out we couldn't. And, you know, I've dug in, I mean, you know this, I've dug into the numbers about who watches Fox. Sure, it's a lot of MAGA people. It's also a ton of independents, a lot of self-identified Democrats in places like I grew up in Ohio, where we went to school in Indiana, where you are in Georgia. Like, it's the news, right? And so for 10 years, I've been trying to give Fox viewers a Democratic perspective to give them something else to consider. And so I do that. It's part-time. It's not full-time.
It feels full-time.
I was going to say it feels
because I see you a lot and I'm constantly sending you little notes saying, go girl, go. Like, because it's not that you're in hostile territory. I think they treat you very nicely on set. But yeah, I love your point, and we're definitely going to dive in to that because one of the things I talk to people about is not being in an echo chamber and only surrounding yourself and watching the same news sources over and over again. And I think what you're doing, I can't believe you've been doing it that long, by the way.
I know.
But
It's crazy. It's almost 10 years. What I say is it's taught me two things, right? It has taught me how to talk to people I have deep disagreements with, very fundamental disagreements with.
Yeah.
But importantly, it's also taught me the limits of that, right? Like we don't just go into any place and talk to anyone about any issue. There are moral limits, there are ethical limits, there are personal limits, religious, right? Like there's limits to how you engage on these issues. And you do this. I know you do this in Georgia and in your work across the country. But it is, I think that it's hard to judge impact. I hear from a lot of people who say they are glad they are given the opportunity to hear another perspective from it that they would not often hear on Fox. And so I think that is both a good thing to do for democracy, as you talk about so much, but also if I want Democrats to win, just electorally, it's
100%
pretty good too, right? And it's
no, right. I mean, you're educating us all. I mean, and yeah, we're gonna talk about democracy and the big D Democrats and all of that. So, so for our listeners and viewers, I want to tell how we met because you mentioned we're both born in Ohio. We're different ages. I'm the old one on the call, but we both were born and raised in Ohio, went to school at Indiana University. But where we met, and I think it's so interesting because it's so much a part of who you are, we met on the Dean's Advisory Council for the Hamilton Lugar School of Global and International Studies at Indiana University. And we were both basically founding members of the Dean's Advisory Council with our good friend Lee, the first dean of the school. And for our listeners, we were on that council, which I do not take for granted, with amazing national luminaries who taught us about bipartisanship and how to get work done. And that who the school is named after, Lee Hamilton and Richard Lugar, U.S. Representative, Senator Richard Lugar, and to sit in a room with them in the twilight of their career, which they certainly were not retired by any means. Their minds were so active. But even back then, when you and I first met on that council, we were talking about, wouldn't it be nice if we could be bipartisan? And they to me, lived and role modeled bipartisanship. And you've been a huge part of America's role in the World Conference at Hamilton Lugar. So that is how we met. And I think that really is kind of my launching point, is being almost 10 years as the Democratic voice on Fox, doing the work you do at Penn with Perry Worldhouse. Like, where do you feel we are right now? I mean, I know this is a very broad question, but like when people ask you, like, how do you feel about the world? How do you feel about US's role in the world right now? Like, what's your starting point on that?
Well, how much time do we have? Can
we have plenty of time. This could be my longest episode I ever do. People just have to get over it.
They just have to be ready to listen to us. Also, what a gift to be affiliated with a school of global studies in the Midwest. Look, I've worked at Georgetown. I've worked at UPenn now. Those are amazing institutions. IU made me who I am. And I am so grateful that in the middle of a state that doesn't, kids at IU aren't like summering in, in France, right?
No.
To be part of building a school that teaches at Indiana's flagship public institution students how to be global citizens, that is a gift. And I'm so grateful to have met you and so many people doing that. And in part, I think about that because of your question. We're in a moment of global history where things are changing very fast, right? There's this old saying, it's often attributed to different people, but sometimes history moves, very, very slowly, and decades go by, generations go by where nothing happens. And then things happen very fast. And it feels like we're in one of those moments where this global order that has sustained us since the Second World War, not perfectly, not without problems, but it is gone and has crumbled. And that the American role in the world, certainly under President Trump, is one of might makes right. Strength, as they define it, is the only thing that matters. The power of our example, whether it's in U.S. aid with development, whether it's supporting NGOs and journalists, where that does not matter, and where our traditional alliances are being tested in ways we have not seen in generations. And so Donald Trump is in many ways an aberration, but in many ways he's not. Some of those threads were starting to pull very thin before he was elected, but he has accelerated. And I think, let's take Iran. We'll talk about Iran later for an example. Over different presidents of different parties, we have dealt with Iran differently over many years. Pressure, sanctions, diplomacy, which I was involved with. No president of any party has ever actually thought they should bomb Iran. Right? And so Trump is throwing out the international order. He is saying that because the American military is so strong, we can do what we want. We can kill fishermen that we claim to be narco-terrorists, right? And nobody's going to hold us to account because the UN can't and Europe can't, all of that. My question, Jim, is what happens at the end of this? That Donald Trump will not be president forever, and someone else will be, and it will be somebody who inherits a situation where the U.S. can certainly do things militarily around the world, but we cannot force anyone to do anything. Just look at the Iran situation today. And so I was in Singapore for an event a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it was my first time in Singapore. It was lovely. And we had someone speak at our event, a former Singaporean ambassador to the UN. And he said, I'm not endorsing this entirely, but he said, if you want to learn about the past, go to Europe. If you want to learn about the present, go to the US. And if you want to learn about the future, come to Asia. Which is such an and it's very provocative, right? But it is that when we're talking about economy, military strength, who can get other countries to do things in support of them. I mean, the United States, we are no longer the world's only superpower. We are a superpower in decline, and how we manage that decline will say a lot about what happens globally next.
Well, I mean, Marie, I was going to ask you, because you said, and I agree with you completely with everything you said, superpower in decline and this world order that we've known since World War II is crumbling. I think that's a really good word. Is that because the U.S. is just because we're on a different path? Like we've created that by saying that the current administration, which Trump is driving, but all the people around him, Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and everybody else, we've just kind of abdicated the role we've always had. Like we've kind of said, nope, we're not going to do it anymore. We're not. A lot of it always comes down to money. We're not going to fund aid overseas. We're not going to fund the UN. We're not going to fund this. We're not going to fund that. But is that what's causing the crumble? Or I was thinking exactly what you're saying, just being in Singapore. Is it that other countries, other regions have gotten their crap together, basically, right?
Yeah, I think it's both because the U.S., look, the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Where do I begin? But the U.S., we have always held two ideas, both domestically and internationally. One, that we are a very individualistic society, right? Individual rights, very important to Americans.
Yes.
And that there's a common good, right? And domestically, I would argue that so much of that common good has been erased. COVID did a lot of that, but the idea that like people wouldn't wear masks around elderly people because they didn't want to, like that is a very selfish position, I would say. And I would apply that to the world. Part of so much of the post-World War II global architecture was that countries had to give up some ability to do things in the cause of a greater good, right? Part of what you do when you say we're going to be part of a global system where you don't get to invade your neighbors because you can, you are giving up something, right? You are saying that there's a greater good and I have to give up some national sovereignty for that greater
Mhm.
good. And so what the Trump administration is doing is just like national sovereignty on steroids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he is particularly interesting because he is very transactional. He does not actually, I think, have deeply ideologically held beliefs.
Mm-mm.
You see it with Iran. He made this like insane deal with Iran where he gave them all this stuff because he calculated that getting global oil markets steady again and getting the stock market fixed was better for him politically. He doesn't. That's
I think better. Okay, I can go there because you're being great. I think better for him politically and better for him personally and
yes,
his financial gains for his family because I think, listen, the book that was written about him many years ago was called The Art of the Deal.
yes,
And I every time I look at him, Marie, and I look at how we work now, it feels honestly like I'm back in big media negotiating licensing deals,
right,
right? Like it's literally,
yeah,
it's not about world peace, it's not about sovereignty, it's not about
no,
climate change, it's not about human rights. It's literally about who how am I going to gain? To your point, how am I going to benefit from this
transactional,
financially? It's transactional
transactional.
and it's not vision based and
No,
it's not mission
that's
based.
right. And that's why the Israelis are so, they're in shock that Trump
Of
pulled
course.
them out. But like they shouldn't be because that's who he is. But the
Yeah.
second piece of your question was an important one too. Other countries are stepping up in our absence.
They
Right?
are.
Not just the big countries, not just Russia who's doing whatever it wants, although Ukraine is doing very well, I will say.
Yeah, yeah.
China, other major powers, but also this rise of these middle powers, Canada, India, Brazil, Saudi
Mhm.
Arabia. These other countries are stepping in, and the challenge is when you have an administration in Washington who only sees strength as military strength. We have an Ebola outbreak in Africa right now, in part
Yeah.
because US aid is not there.
Mhm.
They have this very narrow vision of what strength is, and we will continue to see the ripple effects of this for generations to come.
Well, I love that you say that because so much of the work you do and have done, and I've read and watched over the years, is like this cause and effect thing, right? And there's not it's so funny when you and I joined the dean's council. One of the things I loved about that dean, and that is his quote was, "If you want to change the world, you first have to understand the world."
Right.
Right. And to your point, that's what I've always been so proud of because, in gorgeous Bloomington, Indiana, and in the middle of a otherwise pretty hostile state, there is this think tank of sorts and we're
Yeah.
we're creating students, undergrads and graduates and now PhDs even who are going into foreign service, international business, all of that kind of stuff. And that's the thing that I get frustrated about as an active participant in the democracy
Mhm.
is that I feel like people aren't doing their homework, right? Like I watch people get on planes and go, let's just go into Iran because it's so of the moment right now, right? And I look at the deal and I love that I have analysts like you to help me analyze this, but I actually don't need it because I can pull out the deal that we blew up, the quote Obama era deal,
Yep.
and look at this deal. And I'm like, again, back to my licensing days at Disney, I'm like, this new deal doesn't look so good,
No.
like compared to the old deal.
Mhm.
And yet we're supposed to swallow it and say, oh, no, this is good. And we achieved our goals and the Strait of Hormuz is going to reopen. And I wonder when you're sitting on set, because this is when I really think of you, and you're sitting across all these other people,
Mhm.
when the camera's off, like, are they saying this doesn't make sense or are they just sticking to the speaking points?
It's such an interesting question. And one of the reasons this Iran deal is such a good example, it is so in opposition to everything that Republicans have said they
Yeah.
hated about the Obama deal. I mean, I defended the Obama deal on camera at the podium. Every criticism I was getting literally are now in this deal. And to see people like Lindsey,
I'm laughing, but I'm laughing with tears.
I
Like,
know.
it's like,
I
oh,
actually did not think this deal would be that bad. Trump really overachieved. And
yeah,
he didn't achieve any of the goals that he set
no,
out to.
no.
And those are just facts, right? And so
Mhm.
what's been interesting to me is people like Lindsey Graham, others who for years said we should never give Iran money, we should never negotiate. And now because it's Trump are like, oh, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. The question on Fox is a good one. Because you are right. I have been part of the Fox family for almost 10 years. When my father passed, I got home and I had flowers at my doorstep from the head of the network. Like it is, I have been through elections with these people. I've been through personal situations. In general, they're very kind to me. Even though we disagree about very existential things, I would say to who I am.
Basically about everything, but yes.
Who I am as a human. So what has been interesting for me to watch over the Trump years, Jim, and I'm on, I know this isn't airing for a couple weeks, but I'm on tomorrow for an hour, and off camera, people are often more, I don't want to say more honest, more forthright, more candid. You don't want to say everything on camera. I don't say everything I think on camera.
No, for sure.
I think there is, among the smartest analysts at Fox, the ones that are really smart politically, policy-wise, like there is a broad recognition of how insane so much of this is. Even Karl Rove is an interesting example. He on camera has been very dismissive of President Trump. Very negative on Trump. Karl Rove, who like helped, get George W. Bush elected, and
right.
Like is he calls balls and strikes like he sees them. There are people at Fox who do, and there are certain issues where they do it more. I will say, I wish among conservatives in general, there was more intellectual consistency with positions they have held for decades, that because of one man who holds such sway over conservative media and conservative politicians, how are you I said, like, how are you abandoning everything you believed for decades because what, you're scared Trump's going to tweet about you? Like, I will never, I will never understand those people. And I think there are people at Fox who are doing good work, and I try and encourage my colleagues to, if you disagree, I say when I disagree with my party, I'm happy to. But this is, Jim, people are going to be studying Donald Trump for generations because of this singular hold he has on the Republican, conservative American political ecosystem. It is without parallel in my lifetime, certainly. I mean, Barack Obama had but like, we're Democrats, like, it's a little harder to keep us rowing in the same direction. It is, I hate to use the word cult because that feels very negative, but like,
I know.
It is insane, how he is getting people to discard decades held views because of him.
No, I know. And I think, to me, I was going to ask you, so I'll ask you because I'll ask for an answer. How different does the second administration feel than the first administration? Because you were there, like you said, you started, you were in the administration prior to him, left, then you moved into these roles you're doing now. I want to hear from you how different it feels, both as an expert and an analyst, just as a person, and then I'll share what I think of the first versus second time. But Trump #1 versus Trump #2. How does it feel from your side?
And I'm so curious to hear your answer to this. For me, it feels very different. There were guardrails in the first term. There were things that he would not do. And it wasn't just because he had better advisors, although I think he had much more professional advisors in the first term. Rex Tillerson, Mike Pompeo, like that. I have heard enough and read enough that he and his team feel like this is the retribution tour. That they survived colluding with Russia on the 2016 election, which they did as a campaign. They survived 2 impeachments. They survived January 6th. They survived, they survived everything. They survived him being hauled before New York court, Georgia court, right? They survived. And that the 2 things are guiding term 2 that are different. Number 1, that it is time to get revenge on everyone who did that to them. And number 2, they feel like they have complete power to do that. After the Supreme Court's decision on presidential power, and after everything that's happened, he and his team feel completely unfettered. And feel like there are going to be, this is a question for the upcoming. I know we'll talk about the November midterms today, but there's a genuine question about whether that is true. Because in every election we've seen since he won a second term, Democrats have way overperformed, right? The story of the Trump second administration is a story of Trump overreach, right? People wanted to close the border. They didn't want American citizens getting gunned down by ICE in the street. Right. And so, like, I think there is a big question about November and if there will be some accountability at the ballot box, because they think there is no accountability for them.
No, I agree. Okay. And I'm going to go right back to that. I'm going to answer your question. Yeah. First off, I 100% agree with you on the feeling. And I think my feeling as, again, an active participant in, and as a former political science student at Indiana University is I think I spent the first 5 or 6 months in shock at the pace of change because of the executive orders. I, like you, believe the best leaders surround themselves with bright people. And I do feel the first time there were people who were smarter and were trying to control him. Now, he fired many of them because he didn't like it. But this time, I feel like he's surrounded by a group of sycophants. And honestly, people who, when you look at them in their past, were quite talented at what they were doing, but for some reason have like signed some code. And this goes back to the cult a little bit. They've signed up for something that I don't fully understand. And so I spent the first part almost overwhelmed and depressed because it was happening so fast. And then I started to see a little bit of imbalance come back. And I want to go into the midterms. This is a great segue into the midterms. Obviously, I'm actively involved in the midterms, especially living here in Georgia. And we have some critical races here that have national implications, international implications. But I also, speaking to my Democratic Party, I do not want them to run on, we need to control the House and the Senate, or the House or the Senate, because we're going to start impeachment trials. Because I don't honestly think that's what the average American is looking for. The average American, these kitchen table issues of inflation and gasoline prices and housing affordability and education and access to healthcare, like those issues are what I need my Democrats that I believe so strongly in to be talking about. And it can't be, we're running because we want to impeach everybody, or we're running because, and it can't be a campaign of, we don't like them, so vote for us. Because I feel like we have to give a message of, what is it going to be if I vote for you? And so as we go into the midterms, and I will say, you and I were talking, I was on an incredible Zoom call with Senator Ossoff last week for his reelection campaign. And it was the day after our runoffs. So he knew now who he was running against. And there cannot be more contrast between the Republican candidate and John Ossoff for Senate and then our governor race. But I mean, that's how I feel. I spend most of the time waking up in the morning, looking at my news feed, reading, watching my shows and saying, what? Like, what? Almost in disbelief. And I think I know you lost your father more recently. I lost my dad a while ago, but my dad was a lifelong Republican, including serving as a mayor of Port St. Lucie, Florida. But my dad was not a Trump Republican. And I think of him all the time up in heaven, just like rolling his eyes and saying, what? Because he was a Reagan Republican. He was a Bush Republican. And there's times where, you and I have talked about, I have voted for Republicans in my life. I used to think I was a centrist, right? I used to think I was almost independent. And in this world where you have to kind of pick a lane, I literally go in now and I've done my research before I go into the ballot box, in the booth to vote. But I'm going Democratic because I'm like, but my whole thing again is not to impeach or impugn anybody. It's, I want the checks and balances back.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And that's what I was raised on. That's what I learned in civics class in high school. That's what I learned in political science classes at Indiana, was separation of power and the 3 parts of government. And I want those checks and balances back. That's what I'm voting for, is checks and balances.
Right. And the differences between the parties right now, I mean, you may not love every Democrat we put up for every office, but the Democratic Party fundamentally believes in American democracy, fundamentally believes that more people should be allowed to vote. As many people who are legally allowed to vote should be able to vote, right? We want to make it easier, not harder for people to vote. We don't believe government can solve all your problems. We believe it can make your life a little better. And there are such great challenges that government has a role to play. Whereas the Republican Party is trying to prevent legal Americans from voting, trying to, they've created this, cult of personality around the president, gaining money off of office, getting every, when we look at the Texas Senate race, for example, like Ken Paxton, who's the Republican nominee, like the corruption, set aside Trump, right? The amount of money he has made off of being in office. That is not why we should be serving in office. So I think you're right. The Democrats need a proactive message. It can't be all anti. But I would say, I do think that we as Democrats need to figure out a way to make the Trump and Republican corruption tangible for people.
Yes.
Why does it impact your kitchen table issues, right?
Yes.
I mean, some people say, oh, look, everyone would break tax law if they could and keep more money. It's like, I mean, sure, okay. But why is all this money that he's making hurting average Americans? That's a harder case to make. But I do think that we need to demonstrate in some way that's not just anti-Trump, how what he's broken matters.
Okay, so do you think, because this is one I've had for you, I wrote it down. Do you think what happened in Hungary we can learn from? Is there, because I feel like he ran very much on an anti-corruption message, right? And Orban loved Trump, right? And was very Trumpian, I think. Yes. Can we learn from that?
So I think there are two things we can learn. It's funny, I almost brought it up in my life.
No, but we're
on the same wavelength. So there's two things I think we can learn. The first is about corruption. The opposition made very tangible how Orban's corruption was leading to people's lives being worse.
Yes.
Right. And that's a harder thing to do. But when you have pictures of Orban's, like he had pet zebras and
and the peacocks and all
that. And there's no toilet paper in hospitals. Okay.
Yeah.
So that. The second thing, and this is very important for Democrats, the opposition leader that they rallied around, policy-wise, is not beloved by everyone. He actually was in Orban's government at one point and became a dissident, an opposition leader. He, in some things, is more conservative than many progressives in Hungary would like, but they knew they needed to rally around one person who had the political talent and skills to beat Orban. And, and I think there's questions about how he's going to govern, right? Because there are parts of his coalition that had to close their eyes and breathe deeply to support someone who had policies that they did not support in the service of the greater good. And so as we enter after the midterms, a presidential cycle where we're going to have every Democrat and their mother running in the primary, and there's going to be a lot of litmus tests, and there's going to be questions about Israel and AIPAC and, and trans issues and all
these LGBTQ issues, for sure.
Which of all the things I light myself on fire on about Fox, trans issues is one of them. I am just it makes me, diverging for a second, so angry. And I am, it is the thing I often get most fired up about on Fox about, we need a broad coalition who does not agree on everything to come together and defeat Trump and Trumpism. And we can't have purity. Look, we should keep our morals and ethics and all of that. Fine. We can't have these purity tests that prevent us from coalescing around someone who can actually win.
No. And I love where we're going on this. And for our listeners and viewers, this is literally how Marie and I talk when we're in person, which is what I wanted. But so the Democratic Big Tent, I mean, you're part of the Big Tent, right?
Yeah.
In 2026 and 2028, can the Big Ten, and I'm going to just say it bluntly because it's my podcast, can we get our shit together, right? Because one of the things I love about the Democratic Party is we were the Big Ten. We are the Big Ten, and we should care about human rights and LGBTQ rights and women's rights, access to healthcare, all of those things we can care about. But I worry about the fractioning and the factions even within our own party. And watching I was thinking about you watching the Obama Center open last week, right? And what the world got excited about in Barack's speech, and to her credit, Michelle's speech, was it reminded me of the Big Ten. It reminded me of the audacity of hope. It reminded me of a intelligent, well-spoken person, but talking in a way that everybody can understand, like talking to the masses. Like it was not this overly intellectual speech. Can we get there? I mean, can we get there?
Well, and speaking to the promise of America, not problems, right? Trump is all about American carnage.
Yeah.
He's so dark. It's so, nihilistic in some ways. And for better or worse, Obama was about hope, right? And that together we can do better things. So I think in 2026, we are there and we will get there because we don't need a national leader yet.
Yeah.
We have really good candidates running tailored to their districts and their states. I mean, John Ossoff, your senator, he's at the top of my 2028 presidential list.
Yes, I know.
Georgia, I think he's great. I mean, you're the expert, I'm not. But I think we have found, and in every election we've seen since Trump won again, as I said earlier, we found candidates who match their voters. And all of those groups that we lost to Trump in 2024 that we were concerned about, young men, Hispanic voters, voters of color, they've come back to actually pre-Biden levels. So they're coming back. They're not lost forever. The real question is 2028, because we will need to decide who we want to be a national unifying leader. And the Republicans also have to do that, by the way. They're also going to have a primary where they debate these things that could include people like Tucker Carlson or J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio. But we have to get our shit together, because I think one of the problems with the Biden years was that the Biden team thought beating Trump once was enough. And it wasn't. And so we need to start building a set of national leaders who can not just beat Trumpism once, but continue to do it. And when I look at the Democratic Party leadership in the House and the Senate, I have questions. Certainly about Chuck Schumer, I have more than questions. I think his time as leader should be over after this election. But who's that going to be, right? And we're going to have a lot of people, governors, senators, members of the House running for president. And this is, every election we say it's the most important election of our lifetime, but it really does feel like
Well, and don't you think, as based on your history and your role as an analyst, like, I think a lot of people, like, I think competitive primaries and having the debates and the discussions we need, like, I hope a lot of people can raise, I know it's about money, can raise enough money and have the persistence and the patience to go through not a contentious primary, but a competitive primary, I would say, on both sides, frankly, to get to the best candidate, right? I think that's part of what hurt us in the Biden-Harris transition, is that we didn't really have a primary and people didn't really get to know her, and they only knew her as the vice president of, people knew her in California. I knew her from California because I had lived in California. But so I hope a lot of smart people run, and I hope Fox and CNN and MS Now and everybody has a lot of debates and has a lot of town halls, not even debates, but like town halls, and that they have to surround themselves with smart media and communications people to get their message out. I hope they do. And I hope people, like, looking at what happened. I mean, we're recording the day after the New York elections and looking at what happened there. I hope leaders of all the factions of the party, the Democratic Socialist end and the more centrist end, I hope leaders from all factions of the party step up and raise their hand and say, I want to lead the United States, and this is why. Right?
Right. That's right. And I look, 2016, the Republicans had so many debates in town
So
halls.
many.
It arguably gave them their strongest candidate in the general election, Donald
They
Trump.
did.
Right?
Totally.
And I agree with
And he took them down one at a time.
one
like,
at a
boom,
time, right?
boom, boom.
So I also want to make sure, as everybody runs in 2028, that we have a younger generation or not part of the establishment. I mean, if we have learned anything in these
Represented, yes.
it's that people are done with the establishment. We saw in New York, and these weren't actually particularly old incumbent members, they were incumbents, right? We're seeing it in Maine. We're seeing it in so many places. People are done with 80-year-old senators, and they're done with people being in Congress for 30 years.
Totally.
So we need people running. And look, that was Donald Trump. He had not been in politics, right?
He was an outsider. He ran as an outsider.
And so I want to make sure that those people are throwing their hats in the ring. I also, to your point about unity, though, I mentioned Texas a minute ago. Jasmine Crockett, who lost the primary to James Tallarico on the Democratic side, she is still not endorsing Tallarico or campaigning with him.
I know.
And I'm really upset about this because, like, I get it. It was a primary. Primaries are hard. They're not fun. I'm sorry that she didn't win. But, like, greater good. This is a moment to focus on the greater good.
100%.
You know?
And I agree. And that's where I get mad at the Democratic Party. And that's why, by the way, in my time, talent, and treasure that I'm devoting this cycle, I'm devoting it to candidates and not to the DCC or like I'm not donating. And hear me, people that listen to my podcast, I'm not donating to the national causes and the national platforms. I'm going individual by individual. Like it started for me with Gina Ortiz-Jones, who became the mayor of El Paso, right? Like, and I was a Bree Fram person when Bree was running, right? And Virginia, and I'm an Ossoff person. I'm a Keisha Lance Bottoms person for governor of Georgia, but I'm donating directly to their committees, and I'm putting out the yard sign. Like I'm doing the old fashioned, all politics is local.
I love a good yard sign.
Yeah, I love a good yard sign.
Yeah.
I love yard signs. I wear a hat. I'll wear the t-shirt. Like I'm branding myself with what I believe in, but I'm literally going candidate by candidate because I want to put my money kind of where my mouth is, right? And I don't just want to say elect Democrats. Like I want. And okay, so you kind of started your list. I think this is interesting. Ossoff's on your list. Like, who else should we be watching for 2028? Because there's a long list, but like, who are you excited about as an analyst and personally?
Yeah. But I also, by the way, think you're right about focusing on individual candidates. That's where the voters are too. What is the DNC doing? What is the D-Trip doing? These organizations are not really effective. Okay, so John Ossoff's at the top of my list.
Yep.
Because I think he is a new generation of leader. I think he straddles the progressive and more centrist parts of the party incredibly well. I think what he's done on Israel is a great example of this.
Yeah.
And I think he is I have been so impressed with his stump speech and how he has grown as a candidate, particularly in this election cycle. When I see him speak, I think he has national.
He's sharpening his message so well.
He is, and I hate to say this, he looks older. Like he's
got gravitas. He's got all those words, right?
Right.
Like telegenic, gravitas, like all.
That's right.
All those words. Okay,
and
so I agree.
He makes an anti-Trump case, but doesn't make it angry. To your point about he presents a positive view, like he does, but he does take on Trump, and I like that. So, okay, who else is on my list? So this is going to be controversial, maybe. I don't know.
I'm ready.
About your former governor of California. I think love or hate Gavin Newsom. You know who he is. He gets a lot of media attention, and he knows how to hold it. And he is fulfilling a place in the party that wants to just like screw Trump every day.
Yeah.
So
I want him in the mix.
Yeah.
I don't. Having lived under him and
so
stuff.
Curious your thoughts on him.
I know, but no, but I think he absolutely is in the mix and should be in the mix. And it's a voice. Yes, all the stuff you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's there. So I will give you a couple other names. I really love Governor Wes Moore.
I love Governor Wes Moore. Yeah.
He's running for re-election this year. I genuinely don't know if he's going to run for president or not. I like him not because people think he's the next Barack Obama. I think in some ways that's like not fair to say like he's the next Barack Obama. But I think his personal story, his service in the military, his upbringing, and he won as governor the first time by campaigning in parts of Maryland the Democrats never go to, the Eastern Shore, red parts, and like is willing to meet voters where they are, which I think is a very good skill. A lot of people are talking about Governor Shapiro, governor of my
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. I am
Governor Bashir, another one.
And Governor Bashir and Governor Pritzker. So, right, there's this slate of governors who clearly are interested.
Yes.
And governors do well often in presidential elections because they have executive experience, right? So those are sort of the three governors that people think about. So that's, and
what about Governor Whitmer? Do you think Governor Whitmer, or do you see her as a role in the administration?
I see her as a role in the administration. I am, this is something I hate to say. I am hesitant about nominating a woman.
Okay, well, you can say that, and then I'm going to go on and say this because we haven't said his name.
Yeah,
I absolutely love Pete. Yeah. I love Mayor Pete. I saying, and I will get filleted in the comments on this, Marie, so just wait. This country is not ready to elect an out LGBTQ man or woman, by the way. And I think there's incredible leaders on both sides, and I'm not proud saying that.
I know.
I have sat with him. We honored him at a charity that I was involved in. I've sat with him and his husband. I think he's brilliant. And I think and I hope he has a very major role in the next administration for all of us again, right? Like, and I'm talking like Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense, by the way, because after Hegseth, someone's going to have to clean up that department, right? And that's my hope. And I'm sure he will run. And there's a lot of people that are going to kill me for this in the comments. I live in Georgia where we could not get Kamala Harris elected, to your point, right? And you as a woman just said, I'm not sure we can get a woman. We watched what they did to Hillary. We watched what they did to Kamala. And I'm saying the same thing. And I hope it's still in my lifetime.
I know.
It may be in the next generation that an LGBTQ out person could be elected president of this country. It's not 2028. And I'm not willing to risk it because I agree with you. I think 2028 is such a pivotally important election. And I want the best candidate to win from the Democratic Party. But I hope he participates in debates because he'll challenge people.
So who else are you excited about then?
It's funny that, I mean, you said on that list, I mean, I really, and I think it's because I do live in the South now and I've been in the South 6 years. I am excited about Senator Ossoff. I am excited about Westmore. I am excited about Andy Bashir because they've won statewide races in otherwise very, very red things. And I'm for any governor, to your point, because I also, the anti-governor, like I do not want what's happening in Texas. I do not want what's happening in Florida. And I do not want what's happening in our college state of Indiana, right? The state of Indiana politically makes me nauseous and sick to my stomach, what they're doing, right? And so I'm interested about people who have been able to run and to be blunt, you know, Bashir and Pritzker and Shapiro are white men, right? I mean, and I love Westmore. I don't want him to be branded the next Obama.
Right.
It's not fair.
No.
It's not fair. But, you know, so much of his story is a little evocative of that, even though their backgrounds are very different. So, yeah, your list is pretty much my list. But also what I think is interesting is because I know and you know, because you worked in administrations, it takes a village. Those names, I want them in the next administration, right? Because I think president, vice president, secretary of defense, secretary of state, secretary of everything.
Yeah.
That is because what's happened in the Trump administration, what they've done to education, what we've done to the Department of Defense, what we've done to transportation, what we've done to all the, like, I want really smart people as secretaries in the next administration.
That's right. That's right. And I also, look, one of the reasons I loved Barack Obama and was like with him from the start
You were, yeah.
was because I'm looking on my office wall at a framed 2008 campaign poster of his. Just, I looked up at it as I said that. He challenged the party orthodoxy, and
Mm-hmm.
he was talking about things in new ways. And now it's easy to forget that because he has gray hair and he has a presidential life. But when he said he would negotiate with Iran, when he said he would open to Cuba, when he said we actually do need to get universal health care, he was saying things that people had not been willing to say. What I
Yes.
don't want, and I think this is again was part of the Biden administration problem, is that they just tried to go back to what we had before. And it was a lot of the same people and it was a lot of the same orthodoxy. And they did not
Mm-hmm.
realize how the world and the country had changed. I want people with like legitimately, and this is why you see voters so anti incumbent right now. They want people with new ideas. It's not working. It hasn't worked.
No, I agree. I agree. And it's so funny when you were talking, I was thinking, because I was looking around my office, and one of the books I have is Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, A Team of Rivals, right? And I think that's Lincoln. She was writing about Lincoln. And that to me is also the kind of leader that I'm looking for, who is going to put people around them who they don't all agree with, right? I don't want the sycophants that we have right now, right? And so by the way, we didn't say her name because I don't think she can be president. I want AOC to have a role.
Same.
Nationally.
Same.
Absolutely, right?
Absolutely.
Like I really, really admire her. I think, to your point, I think Jasmine Crockett could have national implications if she would play the game nicer in Texas right now, right? Exactly what you said. And I think this is a democracy. And that goes back. You and I have talked about this so much is I feel like we have to go back and just do some education on what is democracy, because there's a generation growing up that I don't think really has had an example of what democracy is. Like,
right.
Or a functioning democracy, right? Like where,
Certainly.
and you and I have talked about this. I am so proud of being a US citizen and being a Democrat and being in a democracy. And that means I'm not always going to get my way. And that's okay. And, but
for a lot of people, that's not okay, right?
I know, but also it does not mean I'm not going to use my platform to scream when I say things that are wrong. And I think one of the things for me, I mean, you talked about the chapter you're in, the chapter that I'm in, because I'm not working big corporate anymore. And I don't have those handcuffs of, Jim, you can't say that. You work for Disney, or Jim, you work for DreamWorks. Like,
yeah.
I'm using my platforms like this, like my newsletter, like LinkedIn, to speak my truth, right? And and people don't always agree with me. And I did a post, Marie, I don't know if you saw, I did a special edition newsletter on the UFC fiasco.
Oh no,
you have to go back and read it. You have to go back and read that. You have to go back and read it.
Right.
It was like a special edition where I was basically, honestly, like, WTF, like what? I mean, like what? Like, and that LinkedIn discussion got really, really dicey.
Oh,
and
I can't wait to read it.
And I had people coming after me, but I appreciated it. And you can even look in the comments where I tried to engage with people and say, isn't it great that we live in a democracy and you're allowed to tell me that you think I'm an idiot, right? Isn't it great that you fundamentally disagree with me and we're allowing to have this forum? Now, I'll be honest, as it got worse and there was some bullying going on, there was some things I had to do, but that post got an incredible amount of impressions, and a lot of people just even noting, thank you for saying what I was thinking, right? And then I was pushing back and saying, you have a voice too. Like, you could have said it. Like, don't wait for me.
Don't
right?
wait. But that's part of what I'm doing at Fox, is trying to give permission to people who may just, when I say, isn't this kind of crazy, you guys? They're like, oh, yeah, maybe this is. On the democracy point, though, very quickly, it's so, part of the problem is that our system is quite anti-democratic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fact that gerrymandering has made, after this cycle, I was reading the other day, like 15 competitive seats in the country, something like that, right? The fact that the Supreme Court, lifetime appointments stacked, the fact that the electoral college so warps the power of individual votes. Like our system is actually not set up to deal with bad actors who want to undermine democracy.
100%. And you and I could be on a panel about the Electoral College when it was designed by our forefathers who were brilliant men, but there's no way they had the foresight of what today was. And it is interesting. I mean, after living 25 years in California, now 6 years in the South, it is interesting to be back in a state where you feel your vote count.
Sure.
Right. And you laughed about it. We talked about this. Like, I lived here and I voted for Reverend Warnock 4 times because of the 2 runoffs, right?
Like
and people are like,
it
sounds like I'm doing right. It sounds like I'm doing something illegal, right? Because they're like, well, wait, isn't his term 6 years? I'm like, okay, he filled a term and then there was a runoff and then he ran again and then there was a runoff. And when I met Senator Ossoff, we talked about that. And I said, but I remember standing in line for those runoffs. We talked about this, Marie, because again, the Republicans were trying to make it hard.
Yeah.
We only had to vote when he was running in that runoff against Herschel Walker. There was only one thing to vote on, right? The line should have been flying because there was only one choice. We stood in line at our local library for an hour and 15 minutes to vote in that runoff because they had cut back on polling places, right? And but if you go back and look at those results, it was in the thousands of votes that he won by, like very low, sadly.
Right.
And I remember I said to my nieces and anybody else that would listen, I was like, Joe and I were 2 of those votes, right? Where is in California, to your point, between the gerrymandering and the history, you're kind of like, okay, an electoral college, okay, the Democrat, like, even if I love the Republican, the Democrat's going to get the electoral votes, and that's fine. But you do feel it here. And I think that's why you and I said we love a good yard sign. I think I just take it so much more seriously. And it reminds me of when my dad was mayor too, where he always said all politics is local. That was a James Frederick Fielding quote, all politics is local. And things like school board elections and mayor elections and city council elections have so much impact on our lives. So much.
One of the most interesting things is how in the Trump era, school board elections and some mayor have been nationalized. Right?
So much.
I lived in Virginia for a long time. Yeah. Glenn Youngkin became the Republican governor of Virginia in large part because of school issues, school board elections, right? And so I think all politics, but part of what I think politicians need to convince citizens of to talk about this is like, it actually doesn't matter how I feel about something that's happening in Virginia. I'm telling you what I'm going to do for you as mayor in this city. I think that one of the things I'm most concerned about with President Trump right now is his very blatant desire to disenfranchise large parts of the voting public. And he keeps talking about the SAVE Act, which is crazy. I mean, he literally says the quiet part out loud. He says, if we don't fix our elections, Democrats will win. It's like, so I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do think, and I've actually, look, Senate Republicans are quite spineless, but they on this have stood up to him. And he's meeting with them today, so we'll see what comes from that.
And we'll see the Wednesday lunch thing.
Exactly, but have said, like, we are not going to get behind this because he is trying to use democratic processes to undermine democracy quite openly. And I'm not worried that they're going to change ballots in the midterms. I am worried that they're going to put ICE outside of polling locations.
They're going to intimidate. Yeah, I agree. They're going to intimidate. Yeah. And God, that makes me feel good that you're there because you've got a platform and I'll use my platform and the rest of us will use their platform. Okay, I am cognizant of time. By the way, I'm saying you're coming back in season 3. We just have to figure out when, because maybe we should come back in season 3 and tape after the midterm elections. That could be interesting, right? Like, I think we come back in like November, December when we see what happened.
An end of year wrap up sort of.
Yeah, I think it should be in the end of 2026. Yeah. And of course then, well, I'll have you on more times too, because then as the presidential election starts warming up for 2028, everything we just talked about. But the last question I always ask, because it's, ask for an answer and you've answered so many amazing things today. But what is the one question you wish I would have asked you that we didn't get to?
Yes. So I do work full time at a university. I didn't
Yes.
need university.
Let's spend some time on
And we
that.
didn't talk about the state of higher education in the country.
And we have time. You keep going, my friend.
I think uh, we are both Hoosiers. We are both IU graduates. Public universities in red states are under an extraordinary amount of pressure, the likes of which we have not seen certainly in our lifetimes.
Yes.
The Ivy League institutions, like the one where I work, are under extraordinary pressure from the Trump administration. And there is, over all of that, questions about how much higher education costs, and
the value,
but also the purpose, right? I understand that we are supposed to go to college, ideally to get a job that pays the bills.
Yeah.
There is something deeper that you and I have talked about that I know you and I both so appreciate, which is making you a smarter person, a better person, a more thoughtful person, a person who's well read and willing to challenge your views. And I think that in this moment where I spend a lot of my time thinking about higher education, both here at Penn and at IU, where you and I are both so involved, I hate to be negative, but the situation feels very bleak at times.
It does. No. And I think, listen, you and I, yes, we have so much love for our alma mater. And I think the other thing that IU did for both of us is it turned us into global citizens. And you and I have talked about that. And we think globally. We're very proud US citizens. We're very proud Buckeyes. Like, we know where our roots are, but it turned us into global citizens. We both studied overseas. We both did work overseas. Like that I absolutely believe. And I think just focusing on Indiana, it does feel very, very bleak. And I'm also extremely concerned what's happening in Florida.
Yes.
And that the people in Florida are not screaming about it, even with the fact that this new college, or whatever it's called, that DeSantis has populated, just bought a campus from the University of South Florida to expand enrollment and everything. And these states that are getting rid of faculty councils in decision making, Texas. Yeah. And I will say that Indiana feels so bleak, and it's fine. I mean, people know now, but I stepped off the board, Marie, it's not a protest resignation. I was at the end of a term. It was kind of a natural time to make a decision whether I wanted to keep going or not. And you and I had the conversation. You were part of my council on this, and I appreciate that. And I talked to many people that I respect. I was leaving those meetings so dark and so depressed and so lonely. And it doesn't mean I didn't have friends and there weren't, camaraderie at those meetings. But I really started to think about what we always talk about in service, especially in non-paid service, time, talent, and treasure. And I thought, I'm 61 years old. I have to use my energy in other ways where I feel like I can actually make a difference. And I stopped believing that I was making a difference in that role,
right?
In the role on the foundation board. I stopped feeling. It does not mean I'm pulled back from the university. It does not mean I'm not still chairman of the Queer Philanthropy Circle and all the other stuff I do. I just had to pull back from that one because it's a classic Jim Fielding in that, the first lesson in my book is control the controllable, but leave space for the possible. So much of the stuff felt out of control because it was being mandated by federal government or mandated by state government and mandated by the IU administration. And I just started to feel a little bit like the canary in the coal mine. Right. And like,
you have to protect yourself. Right. I mean,
and it was an energy thing. And I thought, there's only so many days, there's only so many hours in the week. I'm going to go spend time working on the Ossoff campaign. I'm going to go spend time working on trying to get an LGBTQ culture center built in Atlanta. Like, I'm going to go work on those kind of things because it's that tangible, everything with me, you and I are the same way. It's the tangibility thing, right? How the kind of donors we are, the kind of time that we spend and the money that we spend. I always wanted tangibility. It's why I've done scholarships. It's why you've done scholarships, because you actually meet the students who earn the scholarships, right? And, but I love that you brought up this topic. And I think I've written about it too. It's a really cautionary situation people need to watch. And they need to watch Texas and Florida, who are really leading in curtailing academic freedom and really hurting the value of a college education. And then there's states like Tennessee, like Indiana, that I think just watch what Texas and Florida does and then say, oh, that's interesting, right? Like, let's adopt. And I think president of a university right now, leadership in a university, that is a hard job.
That is well, and at Penn, we are about to have a search start for a new president. So, and I agree with you. I think there is room for good, smart leaders I think so many leaders in higher ed right now have been so reactive, right?
Yes.
Reacting to the Trump administration, reacting to this, that if we need leaders who say, this is what a modern university should look like.
Yeah. And paint the vision again.
The vision. And look, I agree with you. I have always been a believer of changing institutions from the inside, not the outside, but you and I think are on the same page in that we both are focusing on the places that are very meaningful to us and where we can have tangible impact. I mean, Hamilton Luger at Indiana is such a gift at that university. But I do think that more broadly, students, faculty, staff, everybody, we need to make a better case for why higher education is about more than just getting a good job. It is about that. But it's not just transactional. And it's
not just a job placement agency.
It's not just a job placement agency. And so I think that there is a lot of room for younger, thoughtful leaders in this space, but to make their mark. But I agree with you about Florida and Texas and others. This is because, particularly for public universities, state legislatures and governors have so much power.
They do.
This is another reason elections matter, right?
Power, and they have power of the budget. They have power of the pulpit, and it's not like you have to dig very far to find examples of it. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you stay educated as an active person in a democracy and as a person with all these news sources that are available, including the news source that you work with, there's ways to study this. It's not like this. They're not hiding at all. I mean, they're very out in the open saying, this is what we're doing with education in Texas. This is what we're doing with education in Florida. And regardless of if you have kids in school or like if your kids have gone through school already, as Americans, we should be scared about it because that is where the future of America comes from. This is the minds. And like when you go to Indiana University and America's Role in the World Conference or any of the Hamilton Luger events, I always come away saying, okay, we're going to be okay.
I agree.
We got to get these kids out there, right? I'm like, we got to get these grads out there in the world. And a lot of people, I think, again, being in a participant democracy, even if you don't have kids in college in Florida or Texas, you should be concerned about what's going on there as an American. That's my whole thing.
Because, and this is the last thing I'll say, because if they can tell a professor what they can or can't teach, someday they're going to come for something you care about.
Oh my God. Well, that's the way to end. Marie, the mic drop moment. Mic drop. All right, you're coming back. Okay, this is an incredible way to end season 2. You're coming back in season 3.
Thank you, my friend.
You and I will always be in touch. But thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do. Know that I'm cheering. I know I send you texts, but I'm cheering every time you're on TV. And I'm like, go, go, go. Because I'm sure it's tiring. And but you're appreciated. I love the impact you make at IU, the impact you make at Penn, the impact you're making in the world. Thank God for Marie Harf and for all my kind, curious, and talented human beings out there. Make sure you follow the links in the bio so you can follow Marie. Follow and subscribe to this podcast. Share it with people. This one's a sharer. This one's a big shareable one. And it's an important discussion. And we love comments. Marie and I both love comments. So please leave comments as well. And I will share them with her. And I will talk to you soon, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations on everything. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for spending this time with us on Ask for an Answer. If this conversation sparks something for you, don't just nod and move on. Take one idea, one question, one uncomfortable and bring it into your next meeting, your next one-on-one, or your next big decision. That's how this becomes a practice, not just a podcast. If you're leading a team, a classroom, a company, or just your own next chapter, you don't have to have it all figured out. You do have to be willing to listen, to ask better questions, and to create the kind of safety where people will actually tell you what they see. If this episode was useful, share it with someone who's in the arena with you. And if you want more tools, stories, and real talk leadership moments, make sure you follow the show and leave a review so others can find us. I'm Jim Fielding. Thank you for being here, for leading with less armor and more intention. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and keep asking for an answer.